we're staying in our drawingaccurately.dwg file. And as you can see, I've left it in the same state as it was at the end of the last video, with the two rectangles that we created previously using different input methods to draw accurately. I'm going to show you now probably the quickest and easiest method of drawing accurately in AutoCAD. It's called DDE, Direct Distance Entry. But we need to switch on some settings down on the status bar for this to work effectively. Now, we'll leave the grid on, and we're going to switch snap on initially, so switch snap on as well. We're then going to switch on our polar tracking again, this one here. We're going to click on the arrow next to it and make sure that we're using the 90-degree increments. It should be that anyway, the default setting. But if it's set to something like 45 or 30, just make sure you select 90 at the top of the list. We're then going to switch on our object snap tracking, our auto snap. We're also going to switch on our object snaps as well. Click on the little fly out there. Make sure that endpoint, midpoint, center, intersection and extension are ticked like so. So for example, if your midpoint isn't ticked, just click on the word midpoint and it's then selected and switched on. Click on the little fly arrow to lose that menu there as well. Now we're going to start using a lot of the drafting settings all at once in AutoCAD. And this is basically how I draft everything now. You know, back in the day we didn't have all these settings, but they make your life so much easier, these drafting settings. Now, the reason I switched the snap on here is like with this rectangle here, we just want to be able to snap to the grid quickly. So, make sure you're using your objects layer, we should be anyway. Draw panel there and click on the line command. And then pick a point on the grid. I'm going to go with that one there so it lines in with my other two rectangles. Again, it doesn't have to be that particular grid point, it could be any grid point. But just get a point on the grid, like that. And then come down to the status bar and switch snap off. We don't need it anymore. I just want to be able to show you the grid so that you know that you're drawing accurately. Now you can see the dynamic input kicking in like we used previously. This time though, we're going to use these drafting settings. Now I'm going to move the mouse horizontally to the right. Can you see that? The crosshair is going horizontally to the right. Now the polar tracking kicks in, and it's letting me know that it's at 0 degrees, which is an increment of the 90-degree setting that we switched on earlier. But the nice thing is now, the polar tracking is taking over the angle. I don't need to input the angle. As long as I'm moving to the right and I can see that green dashed polar tracking line, all I've got to do is type in the distance where it says 491. So I'm going to put in 500 and press enter once. Done. There's my segment. I now move the mouse vertically upwards. Can you see I get another polar tracking line going vertically upwards, the 90-degree tracking line. I type in 250, enter. There's my 250 line segment. Drag now to the left horizontally. That's my 180 degrees. You'll notice there. Type in 500 and enter. And then it's just a case of right click and close. How quick was that? That's why these drafting settings are so useful, especially things like polar tracking, object snap tracking, object snaps, but more importantly, that direct distance entry. If you've got polar tracking on, all you've got to do is type in your distance and make sure that your polar tracking line is active when you type in that distance and press enter. So that's your direct distance entry method. Make sure you use it with your object snaps, your polar tracking and your dynamic input. Makes life so much quicker when you're creating geometry in AutoCAD.